People have an extraordinary emotional reaction to cloning because it conjures up all sorts of images. The images from science fiction of factory reproduction, and it really makes them face the notion that our technology is going to allow us to intervene even in the most intimate processes of our lives.
Well, Hollywood gets it first, right? But remember the movie The Matrix, when you push a button and become a karate master? Or Total Recall with Arnold Schwarzenegger, where memories are simply put into mind? We're on the border now, the brink, the threshold of initiating all these wondrous things. Think about it. Telepathy, reading minds, telekinesis, moving objects with the mind, uploading memories, even photographing a dream. These are things that are being done in the laboratory today, not tomorrow. When you watch movies like I, Robot, you think that robots are going to take over and they're going to put us in zoos and throw peanuts at us as we dance behind bars.
Right.
No, that's many, many decades in the future. However, what is happening now in the laboratory is that we're beginning to understand our own brain, not a robot brain, but our own brain. We're beginning to understand how memories are formed, why we have super geniuses who can do fantastic mathematical calculations in their head, and photographing your thoughts and using your thoughts to energize machines so that the mind is not going to be replaced. The mind will be interfacing with machines, controlling machines mentally. President Barack Obama, the European Union, had pledged over $1 billion, that's billion with a B, not an M, $1 billion on the next big thing after the Human Genome Project. And that is the Brain Initiative, to sequence and map the entire human brain. We are now understanding how memories are being formed, and the first memory was inserted into a mouse last year. That's how path-breaking and how fast this is moving. And think about this. If we have a memory stored on a disk with all your neural networks on it, and it will live after you die, meaning that just like in her, perhaps some of you will live forever. Your memories, your personality, your goals, your dreams will live in a computer. And perhaps your great-great-great-great-great-grandkids will have a conversation with you long after you're dead.
The military has been doing further projects besides just this. DARPA has the Avatar program, and that's a mind transfer technology that they have. And one of the people that's involved with this research is Dmitry Itskov, and he's head of what's called the 2045 Initiative. And that group is working, and they say that by 2045 they will have the ability to download consciousness into a computer. Now, what I'm going to suggest to you is because over the many years that I've been researching the Illuminati, I keep coming across the proof that they're probably 30 years at least ahead of us in the technology that we know, and maybe even more. So I'm going to suggest, if he's saying that we can do this in 45 years, I'm going to suggest that they're already able to do it. So he's working hard to make the body to be an accessory. What do I mean by that? It means your mind can be downloaded somewhere. They give you a new body. They download that consciousness in there. And then when that body wears out, they download your consciousness to the new body. The neurosurgeon who wrote that bestseller that's out there now, Proofs of Heaven, who had the near-death experience, when I read it, he mentioned the book, Irreducible Mind, which that book that came out in 2007 shows scientific evidence that the consciousness can be indeed separated from the body. So this isn't something theoretical, but they've proven that the consciousness can be separated from the body. And I'm going to give you some highlights that I had time-wise on cloning, because most of us haven't really been following it closely. In 1952, they announced that they had cloned a frog. Right? In 1970, Lord Rothschild he recommended that the United Nations have an agency to license and control human cloning. And in 1977 was the first public announcement of someone being cloned, someone who was very wealthy, but they kept the name of this person secret. And then in 81 they announced mice had been cloned. And then in 97 they again announced that humans had been cloned. And then in 2002 they said 100 people had been cloned. Technically, to clone a person is no more complicated than it is to clone a cow or a pig. There's a few little differences in the steps, the procedures, but as far as complications, it's just as easy. And I'm going to suggest to you that the Illuminati not only have the motive to clone and to transfer consciousness, but they have the means. And if they have the motive and means, what's that mean? It means that they're doing it.
Our scientists have learned how to make people. They call them synthetics. Because synthetics, when you touch their skin, it feels like plastic almost. That's the latest technique. The old techniques, if you guys can rent a video, the boys from Brazil, it gives you the exact way how our government's been making people.
Really? I mean, making people meaning temporary people?
No, walking, talking ones.
Meaning through genetics? You're not talking about that?
Well, let me tell you. The movie shows it, but I'll share it with you right now.
All right.
All I need to do is take 2 cells off of your body.
Uh-huh.
We give them a small electrical charge. I'm just going to act like a fertilized egg. If I got a fertilized egg, all I need is a receiver in order to make it. So they were hypnotizing women, said they were being invaded by aliens. And the fetus starts growing, right? Needs food. Well, they can use cows and sheep, too. Again, a food source, that's all we need. After about 14 weeks, all of a sudden that fetus is gone. Because they've learned to take, that's when the fetus starts developing its own blood supply. Then they've used a pituitary hormone extract that they have, which accelerates the being that grows. Now, the reason was, the so-called elite are selecting on who they want to have around.
But is it a clone or not?
Oh, now you know going about cloning. Cloning techniques, since 1938, they've been making clone people. There's 8 countries making clones.
Okay, so...
Now, let's go to the next step, because this is the most important part.
All right.
If your physical reality that you have, based on this physical life that you have, this dream, is made up of the experiences that is impregnated on your body and in your mind, consciously, right? Mm-hmm. Your soul memory is another thing. Since the body is very physical, and we just got you making a physical being in a few months for spare parts. If you go to the hospital today and get an encephalogram, what's that? That's the memory of your conscious mind. That's downloaded on this being. Now we got a walking, talking duplicate that has the total memory that you have, because we just took it off of your own mind. And more and more of that's coming on the line. I just told you, go rent the movie.
Okay, Boys from Brazil.
Yeah, and you'll see the whole technique on what they show it to you in different places, so you can imagine what it's going on.
Dr. Robert White is a neurosurgeon at the Cleveland Medical Hospital in Ohio. In 1963, he performed the first experiment to keep a brain alive outside the body.
See here, when you take the brain out and isolate it, and you keep it alive and live forever. There have been many attempts throughout the world, particularly in the old Soviet Union, to take the brain out of an animal, they like the dog, for example, and keep it alive with machinery. Now you can do that with the heart, the kidney, the liver, the lung, all the other body organs, solid organs. But nobody had ever been able to do it with the brain. And part of the reason is we must remember the brain is very delicate when it comes to its blood supply. And so when we finally did it and found that this brain of a highly developed animal had brain waves, had biochemistry, was functioning just as it would. Now we couldn't talk to it, we could send it electrical signals, we could show that it could actually hear and so forth, but we didn't know whether it was processing the information. But the point of it all is that that moment in time also said to us, if you can do it for the animal brain, you could do it for the human brain. This incredibly brilliant scientist, Stephen Hawking, who's an astrophysicist actually, he is now in a wheelchair and literally speaks via a computer. And some people, perhaps unkindly, have described this wonderful man as sort of a head on a computer, basically. But he would be somebody who potentially could survive his diseased body through a total body transplant.
To prove that the brain was in fact functioning normally while in this state, Dr. White needed to undertake a second experiment, during which he succeeded in transplanting the head of a monkey onto the body of another. The creature survived for 7 days before the body rejected the head.
In the monkey experiments, these animals are as much a monkey as they were when they were in their own original body. So I would presume, and I'd go beyond that, I would be assured that the monkey personality is retained. So consciousness can be transplanted. Obviously, personality, when I speak of the monkey having personality, can be transferred. And so you might ask, where did this bring us as far as the human spirit or soul goes? And I guess you could argue it can be transplanted.
One of my main research interests is whole brain emulation. We can simulate the nerve cells, the signals going on inside them, how one signal goes from one neuron to another, and that way we can learn a lot of interesting things about the brain. But what about making a simulation that encompasses all the nerve cells in the brain, all the little chemical and electric activities that are happening? That might actually become an emulation, something that is so accurate that it is the same thing. So a neural impulse in my brain, that is of course a biochemical process, but we could imagine in a computer a piece of software calculating that now this much energy must move to that area, those areas will have these levels of chemicals change. So all the processes in the real biological brain would have counterparts in the software. They might be very different from what's actually happening in a real brain, but they have exactly the same function. So the idea of the brain scanning would be to start with the brain, fixate it using various chemical techniques, slice it up thinly, scan each of these slices using advanced microscopy, reconstruct in a computer the three-dimensional structure where everything is and what it is, and then use various mathematical methods to turn that into a computer simulation of what would be going on in the brain. I believe that an uploaded person would actually be a person with consciousness, emotions, and we should give them human rights and treat them as real people. Suppose we have a brain emulation. We have a piece of software that does exactly the same work as a real human brain. That human brain is of course going to be a person with skills, knowledge, emotions, at least if it's a successful emulation. And suppose it was a good mathematician or a lawyer or a storyteller, well, a copy of that brain could do the same work. You could ask the mathematician brain a mathematical problem, and it would be able to solve it as well as the original mathematician. Now, you could imagine, of course, having a lot of copies of brains around, which would allow a lot of problems to be solved. The problem I immediately recognize is, of course, that these copies would also come up with ideas. Oh, I want to do that extra project, but I'm just a single copy. Let's make an extra one.
I am Natasha Vitamora, and I work with the field of human enhancement. I currently live in the United States, although I consider myself a global citizen. It's a very complicated process to consider what it might be like to upload the mind into a different type of system outside the body and outside the housing of the brain. But it's a tremendously wonderful field in that it pushes the limits of what we think we are and what we think we can become. So it's a wide open field of possibilities for not only each individual, but for civilization. I would like to see what the world is like and be part of a species that has pretty much removed death, not as a necessity, but as a conclusion. It's a foregone conclusion. We are going to die. And I think it'd be fascinating to see what it would be like if that foregone conclusion was no longer foregone. There are many different worldviews, many different religious or philosophical belief systems that say don't tamper with that. Humans are supposed to die. We're supposed to age and grow old and die and make way for the young. That's the process. That's the give and take of the seasons, the changing of the seasons. Well, I don't agree with that at all. I think that's old wives' tale. I think it's a myth. And it's like the myth of flying too high, Icarus, who flew too high to the sun and his wings melted and he fell down to the earth.